So in this video, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what portraits can show about someone, and also some of those like active choices that you can make and how they can inject meaning into your portraits. So Richard Avedon took this very famous picture of a keeper, sorry. And instead of like traditionally you would think, oh, a beekeeper, someone would take a picture of them maybe in their little netted hat and their little netted outfit next to a beehive outside or something. Instead, Richard Avedon had the beekeeper take off his shirt and actually have the bees on his body. And so, in this way, we get some clues as to what this guy does, but it's in a much more creative and interesting way. Irving Penn took this photo, which is kind of more of a fashion photo, but I think what's really interesting about this, instead of taking the picture straight on, Irving Penn had the model turned to the side because the structure of the dress was so interesting. So, really, when you take a picture, think about the clothing, think about the other elements, and what would be the best angle for shooting that person and those things. This picture of Muhammad Ali is great because, first of all, it uses shallow depth of field, so it makes the fist much more important than his face. Second of all, the angle turns us into Muhammad Ali's opponent. We see that fist coming towards us, and that is amplified by the fact that Muhammad Ali is looking right into the camera and therefore right at us, the viewer. So a lot of these choices that the photographer made this a much stronger image. This picture, if we look at it, it's kind of got this whole hipster thing going on. We have, here, let's get a pointer. We have the like antique stove in the background and the antique floors. He's got his little Casio keyboard and his what's it called, his harmonica and his little hipster longish hair and his body language, and everything works all together to make it look like I don't know, almost like it was taken in 2002 or something. And then oops, here, Loretta Lux, it's my understanding, when she takes her picture, she has a background in painting. Sometimes she'll actually paint a background. I don't know if she photographs it separately and puts it in digitally, or if she paints a background and puts it behind the kids. She usually takes pictures of little kids. She'll also do some digital manipulation. It's my understanding that she'll like make their eyes a little bit bigger than they would be in real life, and other things like that. And having a very kind of muted color palette, but she gets these kind of otherworldly pictures of little kids. In this image, I don't know a whole lot about it, but from the clues, I can kind of get an idea. So if we see this child holding this younger child, probably a sibling, we see what they're wearing, what their hair is like, we see the landscape behind them, and possibly even a shelter or a place where they are living. And we put those all together to think about like, oh, maybe this is off in some part of the world, or, whatever. We also, the use of props can be very important. So here's Pele, and I like that they gave him like a vintage soccer ball, and he's happy, he's smiling, he's looking at the camera, he's holding the soccer ball, and it gives you an overall feeling about, how he feels about his soccer career. Rienke Dijkstra took a whole bunch of pictures that I like to call awkward teenagers, but she went and took pictures of kids at the beach. And what I find is so interesting in these images is that, they're very kind of plain. The background is very plain. We just see the sand and the water and the sky. And because of that, the body language of these teenagers is much more apparent and sticks out more. If there had been a lot going on in the background, we might have been distracted. But by keeping the background really plain, we concentrate much more on the figure. This is an image of the director David Lynch, and he does really kind of weird and dark movies. And so I like that the photographer decided to light him in kind of a weird and dark way, and his hair is a little messed up and everything. And altogether, it gives that feeling that David Lynch kind of has in his films. Shirin Neshat takes pictures or does a lot of work of Iranian women. And here she actually drew on the picture. So these drawings and writings are not actually on that woman's hands, they're added later. And I think that's just a really interesting thing, because a photograph doesn't have to be the end of art making, it can be the beginning of art making. Trish Morrissey does a lot of work about family, and she has her sister in a lot of her pictures. So I think it's interesting here that her sister is in the image but cut off. And we as the viewer can start coming up with reasons. What does this mean about how they feel about each other, or the role of her sister in her life? Also, her sister's wearing a dress while she's wearing shorts and a t-shirt and different kind of colors and everything like that. So I think we can take all of these clues and come up with some kind of meaning when we view the image. This is a famous picture by Diane Arbus, boy in Central Park with toy grenade. But I think it's really interesting the way he's looking at the camera, the look on his face. The other hand is kind of becoming a claw. And even though there's some things we like to avoid in the picture, like the pole head or things coming out or distracting us, it's still a very strong image, and we're just kind of taken in by this kid's expression and holding the toy grenade. And again, we can use the clues to try and figure out, about the subject of the portrait. So here we see a steel beam, we see a city in the background. He's wearing a suit, but he's holding blueprints. So maybe he's an engineer or an architect that works on big buildings. And here we can look in terms of, okay, we see a guy, he's at the beach, he's wearing a hat, probably to keep the sun off of him. He's got a whole bunch of rakes. We see the spiral in the background, and we can put it all together and think, oh, maybe this is a guy who goes out and makes this kind of artwork at beaches. And we see what he looks like. We see the tools. We see that he uses to make art. We see where he makes his art, and we see kind of what his art looks like. So altogether, it gives a nice full picture because of the active choices of everything that the photographer decided to include. Now, very quickly, I just want to talk about some of Jill Greenberg's work with some primates. So the way you pose your models and capture a moment can affect the emotion that's conveyed. She did a great job of capturing interesting emotions in these primates. This always looks like an old man scratching his bum to me. And whether, we get the sense that this primate's trying to figure something out, or is unsure about something, or is angry or upset, or is just kind of thinking or whatever. He's such a little cutie. Anyway, if Jill Greenberg can get this kind of level of emotion that we can connect to out of primates, non-human primates, I think that you'll be able to get that out of working with humans. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'm looking forward to seeing your photos.